I'm not drinking beer.
World Series 1938.
Drinking beer.
Oh, I don't know.
That's right.
Oh.
When's Ramadan? It's in March.
Out.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to AEI and our panel on the Christmas virtues. This is the second night of Hanukkah, so of course they've got a guy named Goldberg moderating this panel. I guess there's a joke about a house goy somewhere in there. But there's also a kind of consistency when you think about it. The last panel that we did along these lines was on the dadly virtues and all the virtues of fatherhood. And we had notoriously childless curmudgeon and child hater Rob Long moderating. And then the first panel was on virtue itself, and Jonathan Last moderated that. And of course, he's not qualified in the slightest to do that. And then I'm thinking if we end up finally doing a fourth one, we can get Matt Labash to do it, and it'll be on sobriety. Some people in this room got that better than other people did. So I should back up. This is the third in a series of panels on these wonderful, fantastic, brilliant books that have been put out by the Templeton Press and edited by Jonathan Lass on virtue. And there's a slightly cynical interpretation about all of this. This panel, the first two panels were fantastic, and there's a slightly cynical interpretation that this is sort of like the third Ocean Eleven's movie. That it's just an excuse to get the band back together and drink on somebody else's dime and live off past success. But I think it's no time for cynicism.
How many wines did you have?
I had more wines than I needed, but not as many as I wanted. Sort of like Phil Graham and Guns. So I should also say that I'm actually not, in fact, the house goy. The Goldbergs have always celebrated Christmas in my family. When my parents got married, my mom agreed to let the kids be raised Jewish, and I was raised Jewish. But the one deal breaker was that we had to celebrate Christmas. And so when we got our first Christmas tree, my dad cut out a headline from a newspaper, and they glued it to a Christmas tree ornament, cardboard Christmas tree ornament, and it read, "Santa knows we're Jewish." And so I'm actually delighted to be here, and I'm a big fan of Christmas. I'm also a kind of a fan of. I'm a fan of the grossly commercialized, sort of marshmallow soaked in honey, treacly version of Christmas that some of the Cotton Mathers up here in red dresses may not like. But I also, as a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and technically the sponsor of this, much like Santa's indigenous slave labor up north, there are certain things I just simply have to do. And so let me get some housekeeping out of the way. By the way, I think that, when Donald Trump finally gets elected, he will put an end to this practice of dumping cheap toys from the North Pole on our economy. So first of all, I want to thank all the people at the AEI event staff who always do flawless and wonderful work. I want to thank my research assistant, Jack Butler, who I let out of the Gimp's kennel in the back of the pawn shop to come here tonight. And I really want to thank Susan Arellano of the Templeton Foundation, who has been the steadfast and brilliant and insightful supporter of all of these books, and is really, without her, these wouldn't have happened. And of course, then there's Jonathan Last, who's some guy. Jonathan Last, who really did a wonderful job editing this and getting a whole bunch of dyspeptic and curmudgeonly people to write things about virtue and Christmas and whatnot.
Thank you, Jonathan.
So here's the conceit of the night. Each one of the panelists is going to defend some allegedly indefensible aspect of Christmas. If this seems like a wholly contrived and artificial pretense just to let the panelists talk about whatever they want, you're catching on. And what we're going to do is, let me follow my notes here. I'll introduce each panelist, whether they like it or not, and then we'll do it seriatim so that we can keep things moving. And we'll begin with My friend, James Lileks, I would say he needs no introduction, but he probably does. But he's a wonderful and charming guy, and he's a contributor to National Review, and he does about 10,000 other things. And he's here to tell us, each one of you has to say what indefensible part of Christmas you're defending, and then make your case in a timely and merry and pithy manner. So I hand it over to James.
Music. Christmas music. I like Christmas music, eventually. When you walk into the mall a couple of weeks before Thanksgiving, and you're hearing those chipmunks sounding like a dental drill in your ear, say, me, I want a hula hoop. Christmas music at that point is like an abusive spouse begging for sex. Are you in the mood yet? No. You in the mood yet? No. You in the mood yet? No. But eventually you get in the mood. It's different when you're a child, because when you're a child, it's wonderful. All of a sudden, the whole world has a soundtrack. And it's all about the same thing, and you're loving Christmas, and every song is wonderful, and you really don't think about them that much until... When I was growing up in North Dakota, we used to go literally over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house, to a church, Maple Cheyenne Church, this little white clapboard structure in the prairie. And in the back, there was a graveyard. And you would go to the graveyard and you would look at all the names of the pioneers. Johnson, 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 Peterson, Johnson, Johnson, Svensson, Johnson. It's like they'd had an industrial accident at a clone factory. And we would always sing the same song, because it was easy for all the Norske Swedes to sing. It was called I am so glad. Yeah. I am so glad. If you've watched the show Fargo, or if you've watched the movie, you may think that that's actually how we speak up there. That's actually how we speak up there. And this song was I am so glad each Christmas Eve. Yeah, I am so glad each Christmas Eve, yeah, because of, well, geez, you know, that whole savior thing there, you know. Oh, you got the word made in the flesh. That's a big deal. So yeah, I am so glad. And we would sing, I am so glad each Christmas Eve, the night of Jesus' birth. Da-dun, 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 the night he came to earth. I sang this for 40 years before I thought, wait a minute. I am so glad each Christmas night, Christmas Eve, the night of Jesus' birth. Christmas Eve is not, am I wrong here? Christmas Eve is not the night of Jesus' birth. This is like saying, Happy Good Friday, he is risen. It's wrong. How could we get the most basic tenet of our faith's foundational holiday wrong? But you don't think about it at the time when you're a kid. You just don't. You don't pick apart the songs. You don't. You shouldn't. You often. But then you get older and you realize, for example, let's take, Little Drummer Boy, the bolero of Christmas songs. This is a song about an 8-year-old, 9-year-old boy who's worried that he doesn't have a gift for the baby, because as you all know, most 8-year-old boys are really concerned about what to bring to the baby shower. And he decides he's going to bring his drum. So the first line is, come they told me. Oh, no, they didn't. No. There's not a woman in the world who wants to hear that drum. There's not a woman in the world who's given birth, cut the cord, cuddled the kid and said, bring in Buddy Rich Jr. with the Skins. If I could hear a little, drum solo, that's what I want. So that's nonsense. So when you start to pick apart all these songs, they all start to seem a little suspect, even to modern eyes. I mean, yeah, you can imagine the little drummer boy showing up with his little face and pa-rum-pa-pa-pum, and Mary saying, oh, I just got him down. But even the innocuous ones like Holly Jolly Christmas, which we all know from the Rudolph special. Please tell me everybody remembers the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer special, right? Good, of course. Holly Jolly Christmas with good old Burl Ives, happy, bewhiskered Burl Ives. Let's see, what's it? Ho, ho, the mistletoe, hung where you can see. Somebody waits for you, kiss her once for me. Okay, first of all, let's update this for the modern times, shall we? Standing under mistletoe does not mean consent. Positioning yourself under ornamentational greenery does not mean you are going to be kissed. Nowadays, you've got to show up with the proper documentation. All right, I'm going to kiss you here to the mistletoe. If you can initial this, and we'll get this notarized. Oh, and the songwriter over there, I'm supposed to kiss him once for him. So if you just sign here on behalf of that kiss as well. So it's not going to work. No. But that brings up the whole Rudolph special itself, which is full of problematic songs and problematic situations. They could not have made Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the show, the Rankin Bass production from 1964, as we know it today. Back then, it was a wonderful little story with a great little message that we all can understand. Here's somebody who has a difference, but just because he's different, it doesn't mean he's bad. It might mean that he's quite exceptional. That's something we all had to learn. And it's great. Now, of course, Rudolph would be an advocate for the differently nosed. He'd be on the cover of Vanity Fair with Hermie the dentist elf, who's his husband. But if you recall in that show, Santa, who is a jerk throughout the entire show. I mean, he really is. You remember there's a scene, We Are Santa's Elves, where all of the elves show up. They've been practicing all year a song of fealty to their leader. It's like North Korea up there. And they're singing, We Are Santa's Elves, pleading their, showing their complete devotion. He's just sprawled in his chair like this. Needs work. He goes to see his main reindeer guy who's just had a kid. And we go to where this reindeer lives, and it's a cave without a stick of furniture. So we know Santa doesn't pay the guy crap. And Santa, upon seeing the birth of Rudolph, proceeds to sing a song about himself. I am old Kris Kringle. I'm the king of ding-a-ling. And husband and wife are looking at each other. You got that right. Who shows up at the birth of a newborn and starts talking about how great he is? Donald Trump joke goes here. Okay, just want to put that. So then Rudolph, all of a sudden, his nose lights up because of this genetic anomaly. And Santa is appalled at this and essentially says, take him outside the elements and expose him, okay? Try again next year. And the father is so verklempt and humiliated, he sticks a lump of coal over the kid's nose, and realizes, I can't breathe, Dad. I'm getting black lung from all of this. And we learn, of course, later that Santa, as the song and the show goes, has to come to Rudolph later and plead for him to get him through the storm. Now, of course, you would think that Santa, having a global distribution system for toys, would incorporate bad weather into his system. But Santa has neither GPS nor forward-looking infrared radar, so he has to go to this genetic anomaly and say, because otherwise he's going to cancel Christmas, right? If you look at all of these old childhood shows, Christmas is always this close from being canceled because Santa does not want to work for squat. Oh, there's sleet in Schenectady. Christmas will be canceled this year. So he comes to Rudolph and says, with your nose so bright, won't you lead the sleigh tonight? And so that's great, and it's fine, and it all works out, and it's happy because every Christmas song, eventually at the end of it, is a happy story. They all work out well, except for one maybe. And I didn't realize this until, again, 40 years after the fact. I just moved to Washington, D.C., and I was sitting in a bar at 2000 Penn. I remember this. And it was the first year in my life I was never going to be home for Christmas, either Minneapolis or in Fargo, North Dakota. Yeah. And I missed Christmas. Fargo with the left son, the lutefisk, and all the rest of it. And I'm sitting there in D.C., and I'm not happy. And I'm listening to the song, I'll Be Home for Christmas. And I'm listening to it, and I'm thinking, but I won't. And then I get to the last line, which, like the line of I am so glad, I'd never really thought about before. I'll be home for Christmas, if only in my dreams. Because that was a song of an era where so many men were overseas and could only imagine the Christmases that they wanted. And here I was now finding myself in that position where I would be home for Christmas, but only in my dreams. And you realize that you always have in the back of your head some dream, some perfect notion of Christmas that you'll never truly get back to, but you keep reconstructing it the best that you can. And you make a new Christmas with your own family and your own child, knowing that someday she's going to go off and someday she's not going to be able to be home for Christmas and will only be there in her dreams until she makes her own home. And then that will be the home that she thinks about, and on it goes. So in that sense, even the sad song is a great, hopeful song about what Christmas means and means throughout the years. So eventually I like Christmas music. Eventually I do. I'm happy when it's over. So happy. But there's always that moment And sometimes it's on Christmas night itself when everything else is over and all the presents are done and all the emotions done and spent, and you can finally get down to the essence of the season, and you turn on the radio and you listen to a Christmas song for the first time, it seems, with fresh ears. And you think and you wonder, did Alvin ever get that hula hoop? Stupid rodent.
Thank you very much, James. You have a great future as the new PolitiFact columnist on Christmas songs. Our next speaker is Mollie, the lovely and talented Mollie Hemingway, and I fear she's going to wag the bony finger of condemnation at somebody, and she will now present whatever. Even though this microphone is not, in fact, on, is it?
It is.
Usually they give more interference to my pacemaker.
The lack of laughter was natural.
Is this on? These are the jokes, people. All right. And with that, Mollie Hemingway.
Thank you. War on Christmas is my entry. So people are always talking this time of year about the war on Christmas, which this year ranges from Starbucks not showing the proper fealty to snowflakes on their winter cup, to public schools forbidding children from singing Bach cantatas on the grounds that they are too religious. And in fact, Bach cantatas are incredibly religious, like best music ever made, most amazing composer who ever existed, with maybe, Prince right there beside him, but they are very religious. But I would say that about Bach, about him being so great, because he's Lutheran, I'm Lutheran, and we Lutherans are liturgical Christians. You've heard of Christmas and Advent. Well, there's a whole calendar where that's coming from, and we celebrate the whole thing. And right now, we are in a where everyone else is on the war on Christmas. I'm really focused on what is actually happening, which is a war on Advent, of course. And it's very upsetting. But right now in America, the Christmas season officially starts, I guess, right when you put your last leftovers from Thanksgiving into the fridge, and it goes up until Christmas Day. Unofficially, it actually starts well before then. I like to see how soon in August Costco puts out the Christmas decorations. But that's not what season we're in right now. We are totally in Advent, and Christmas starts later. So Advent is known for preparation. You're praying, you're penitent, not partying, not shopping around the clock, not going to holiday parties every 3 times a night and whatnot. But no matter how much mistletoe I burn, no matter how much eggnog I throw in people's faces to try and get this point across, they just keep celebrating it their way, and it arouses some liturgical anger in me. And they're all about white Christmas and shopping and Jolly Saint Nick. And Jolly Saint Nick is a particular focus of my anger. Saint Nicholas was a real dude. He was born 1700 some years ago, and his feast day was yesterday, December 6th. And that is when it should be celebrated. And it's very frustrating to see people turn him into Santa Claus and whatnot. One of the best things about St. Nicholas, by the way, is, I don't need to go over all the details, you know them well, the time during the Council of Nicaea in 325 when he slapped the heretic Arius, who was very wrong on the doctrine of Trinity, and he basically saved Christendom. But the important thing is that he walked across the room and he slaps the guy who was wrong, and this is why I adore St. Nicholas, because I also like to slap people when they're wrong. And he was also a very generous person, and we one of the best stories about him is that his parents died in the plague, and he was left a lot of money, and he threw bags of gold coins into the window of a family that had fallen on hard times, and one of them fell into his stocking, and literally to this day, we mark that act of generosity, and we do that stocking tradition. And St. Nicholas came to our house yesterday. It was amazing, and the kids put the shoes out. Gold coins were placed in the shoes. Apparently, St. Nicholas shops at Trader Joe's to get those gold chocolate coins, which I thought was interesting. And then
Those weren't the William Devane gold coins I see advertised? You should look into that.
not quite, but then we went to a St. Nicholas Day party, and we did, we had food and dancing and feats of strength and eventually crying, typical party activity. But I find it also interesting how different cultures celebrate St. Nicholas. Americans, how do you keep your kids in line this time of year? Oh, we have Santa send one of his elves, and we set him on a shelf to teach him about the surveillance state. And then, if they're really bad, instead of getting the Lego Imperial Shuttle, they only get the Lego Death Star or whatever. And then, hey, British people, how do you keep your kids in line? Oh, we tell them if they're naughty, they might get coal in their stocking. And then, hey, German people, how do you celebrate Christmas? And it's like, oh, we just tell them that if they're bad, Santa sends Krampus, a demon monster, to eat their heads, which, just really escalates quickly. And my mother, I don't know if people understand what it's like to have German parents. My mother is German in both spirit and ancestry, and it is... It's really amazing. Her favorite story is how one time, for fun, she dressed up as a witch and snuck out of the house and then rang the doorbell and terrified us. And to this day, she was very convincing. And to this day, she likes to tell stories just about how terrified we were, how we were begging for our mom to come rescue us. But she was the witch. Anyway, it's really awful. But so most cultures... They teach children morality through Aesop's fables, and you get these aphorisms about how to behave. And in German culture, those stories they're very interesting. So if you are a little boy who's we learned about a boy who's having trouble stopping sucking his thumbs, and his parents are really insistent that he stop sucking his thumbs, and then they send someone to cut off his thumbs. As you do. Or the boy who's a little bit finicky about food and starves to death. Or the girl who plays with matches and dies in an epic conflagration. So you learn your tales just a little bit different. Basically, don't go up against a German when terrifying children is on the line, is the number one thing to take away. But lest you think that...
Is anybody surprised by that?
Lest you think that Advent is all about prayer and your children wetting the bed, it's actually mostly about preparation, which is good because when Christmas finally comes, on December 25th, you get to go on this 12-day bender of parties and fun and games. And it actually lasts all the way through February 2nd, but the first 12 days are really key. And I can't tell you how many people hear about the 12 days of Christmas and they think, A, that it's a Muppet song, and it is a good Muppet song, and Beaker gets me every time on that ninth verse. But also they think that the 12 days of Christmas are leading up to Christmas, which is just ridiculous. And, this used to be something that we knew. Shakespeare talked about Twelfth Night, the whole play is to be performed on Twelfth Night. So I like to do things properly, Advent during Advent, Christmas during Christmas, really make a good show of it. Unfortunately, at the precise moment that everybody else is just done with Christmas is the moment where we get things going. But the thing is that since we're talking ostensibly about things we hate, but actually we kind of love, I know that if there were no fights about this, that there would be basically nothing that we'd be doing. There's no war on Whit Sunday, although it is something I'm trying to get going because I want to teach people about Pentecost, and I had this idea for flaming cocktails, and we could have a party to really teach everybody. But, we don't have commercialization of Ascension or the Annunciation or Pentecost, and we don't also really celebrate those in our culture, and not even that much in the church. So for America's Christians, the idea that we all still celebrate this holiday actually means a great deal. And the other thing is that while I wish my liturgical purity were pure of heart, if I'm being totally honest, one of the things I love about celebrating Christmas properly is that you would not believe the doorbusters that start the day after Christmas. You get 50% off, 75% off. They're practically giving stuff away. And you appear to be this really generous gift giver, but really you're just celebrating Christmas properly. Anyway, point being, Americans are wicked people, and Krampus is coming to eat your children's heads. But like while we're going on that toboggan ride to hell, we're singing Jingle Bells together, and I think that means that there's basically a plus side to everything.
I particularly appreciate that you don't understand why celebrating Christmas as it should be celebrated doesn't work on more people when you sell it as terrifying small children cutting off their thumbs. And actually, the best part of it seemed to me was the part about being allowed to slap people. I mean, that's actually pretty awesome. I mean,
I have a question about the 12 days of Christmas, though. I've always wondered this. We all know what the 5th day is, right? What's the 5th day? Right. Beyond that, we just mutter. But on the 11th day, I think it's Lords a Leaping. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And if you bring 11 Lords of Leaping on the 11th day, come the 12th day, are you obligated then to bring again the 11th Lords of Leaping on the 10th, the night all the rest? Is it cumulative until the last day?
I honestly have wondered this so many times. Like,
because that's what the song says.
Right.
James, you realize it's not actually scripture.
Well, we had it on a record with Doris Day singing it, and if Doris Day isn't scripture, I don't know what is.
all right. And with that, we're going to move right along to Jonathan last, but not least. And I have no idea what he's about to talk about.
It's least. I am here to defend Santa Claus as an institution against people like James, who thinks that he's an evil slave driver in the mode of Jeff Bezos, and people like Mollie, who think that he's too commercialized. You might think that everybody likes Santa, but as my colleagues have pointed out, that's not true. There is a moral and intellectual case against him. And it goes basically like this, that Santa is at best, a stooge who is enabling the commercialization of Christmas. And at worst, he's actually the motive power behind it. He's the guy who's subtly pushing parents to go to Costco starting in August 29th, which is I think what it was this year, and start buying the new Kylo Ren lightsaber, which is better than the old lightsabers because it has 3 blades as opposed to 1, and that makes it better. And so Santa's the one who's encouraging us to go and buy all this plastic junk imported from China on ecologically unsafe container vessels. He's also, from a theological perspective, he's the primary distractor from Christ. I mean, if Christmas is supposed to be about Christ, all of a sudden Santa appears as this substitute Messiah. And in seen this way, you actually might even think that Santa is actually a double agent in the war on Christmas. Ostensibly, Santa is a guy helping us all celebrate Christmas, but secretly what he's doing is he is secularizing and commercializing the holiday and dragging it, kicking and screaming away from its actual roots. And even if you don't buy into all the Jesus stuff, and if you just sort of like the idea, if you're a Starbucks red cup kind of Christmas person, in this way, Santa is emphasizing the worst parts of Christmas. He's not giving you the peace on earth and goodwill towards even the people you don't like and want to slap. What he's doing is he's teaching kids that Christmas is about getting stuff, which Rob probably endorses. But so despite all of that, despite all those, I think, very sensible arguments, I would say that Santa is actually pretty great and is, in fact, probably the single most important thing about Christmas. I would say growing up, I was educated by Quakers. I went to a Quaker school. The Quakers are great.
Lots of slapping there, right?
I think I had the only elementary school library in America with an entire section on the nuclear freeze movement. I'm not even kidding. And the Quakers are, they're Christians, sort of, Christian-ish, and they were not really into Jesus. The Quaker Holy Trinity was George Fox, Dag Hammarskjöld, and the United Nations. And those are their gods. But they were okay with the idea of Jesus. And in fact, they let us have once a Christmas pageant. I was in 2nd grade. Tina Fuco was Mary. And it was really weird because...
How'd she look? Would she look good?
So good. Oh, Tina Fuco. But they let us have Jesus once. They never let us have Santa even a little bit. The Quakers were all very anti-Santa. And I found this a little bit constraining because I worshipped Santa as a kid. I would write Santa letters, and unlike most kids, I didn't send him wish lists. I just sent correspondence. Hey, Santa, how are you doing? How are things going up there? I've had a really good year. I was just reading the Littles. It's a really cool book, although I don't know that there are really people who are tiny with tails. And I would write Santa these long, like 3-page letters on Christmas Eve, and I would leave them out carefully placed on our coffee table. And then the most important thing to me when I woke up at 4:30 in the morning on Christmas and came downstairs was going to see what Santa had written back. And I would sit there and I would read his letter like 4 different times. And then I would carefully walk around the presents, and I would pick each present up and look at it and put it back down. I never even really cared what was in them. And then when it was done, I would go and I would sit on our ugly little cream-colored sofa, and I would clutch Santa's letter, and I would look at all this, and I would experience like actual reverence, like the calm reverence that people search their entire lives for, and I felt it towards Santa. And I would say, if we're all going to be honest, we're in the trust tree, we're in the nest of understanding. I believed in Santa long past the time when most of my friends had given up the ghost. Possibly even past the time when one of my friends had discovered girls. And if you really, really pressed me, I would tell you that even tonight, I still believe in Santa a tiny, tiny little bit somewhere deep in my black heart. Before you mock me, I would remind you that 48% of Americans believe in UFOs. 50% of America voted for Barack Obama twice. People believe all sorts of crazy things. And I'm Catholic. As the people in play poker professionally say, when you're pot committed to the idea of the virgin birth, then an 800-year-old guy who can warp space-time and decides to use this ability to travel the globe once a year giving out presents, well, I don't know, it's not so weird, right? It sort of makes sense. And so I would say this. My case for Santa, my moral case for Santa rests on 3 things. The first is that Santa is the only figure in the entire Christmas narrative who is interested in justice. Everything else about Christmas is about forgiveness and redemption.
What about Krampus?
And joy. Well, this is what. But Santa cares whether you've been good or bad. There's a naughty list with Santa, and I'm convinced that's why the Quakers didn't like him. Because to the Quakers, everything is fine. I remember, this is a brief aside, in 3rd grade, not that I'm still clinging to this, I won a contest, and the winner got to choose an activity for the class to do, and I was so excited about this. And I then found out after the fact that the winner gets to choose an activity for the class to do, but the entire class has to unanimously agree to it. And if there's a single dissenter, they have a veto, at which point I thought, my Quaker teachers are crazy. And they're communists. My political awakening was this moment in 3rd grade. So Santa gives you justice, and what he does second, he provides you, as Mollie suggests, he is a third-party point of leverage for parents, and this is really important. You can only be the bad, if you're not German, you can only be the bad guy for so often in your relationship with your kids before they start to hate you. And to be able to outsource some of that bad guy to somebody else is amazing. And so when you can say, as the British do, or we do with our little elves on the shelves, and when you can say, well, you can do that if you want, but Santa's not going to bring you a Lego Death Star. You might get a lump of coal. That's very powerful, and I'm grateful to Santa Claus for that. But the third thing, the thing which he does, which is most important, is that Santa is really the training wheels for belief. We believe in all sorts of things in life, and those beliefs change as we get older. What distinguishes kids from grown-ups is why you believe in things. As you become older, you become a little more sophisticated. You require either some proof or a chain of ontological reasoning. That's important. Why you believe is important. But how you believe is also important. And when it comes to the important things like love and truth and God, after you understand why it is you believe in these things, you have to know how to believe them. And Santa, think about the way kids believe in Santa. that is a beautiful way to believe. It's to believe wholly with yourself, to believe totally guilelessly, to believe without any self-consciousness whatsoever. And I think that one of the things we aspire to is to, as we get older, to be able to believe the things we actually believe the same way we believed in Santa as a kid.
That's why people support Donald Trump.
Exactly. And that is why I would say Santa is the most important, the second most important thing about Christmas.
Wait, check it out. I found Tino Fuoco on Facebook. She got really fat. Check it out.
So by far the best part of Jonathan's brilliant exegesis there was the daggers of death by Krampus in a red dress sitting next to her that she was staring at him the entire time. So the next person on the list is Steve Hayes. And as you can tell, I've sort of foregone formal introductions. You have these pieces of paper. You know who all these people are. But I was looking at this, and I found out that Steve Hayes has written for Salon. Someone's not getting visited by Santa.
This was in 2000.
Yeah. I was young. I was drinking.
He's young. He needed the money.
It was my first paid freelance piece, and I went to cover a hot sauce festival in Reno, Nevada.
Is that what they're calling them now?
This is true. I needed the money. Back off.
The power of Krampus compels you. The power of Krampus.
Exactly.
They told me it wouldn't be on the internet. And now, all right. Next up, my friend and colleague Steve Hayes.
So I gotta admit from the outset, I'm sort of pissed because I was gonna do liturgical anger and slapping Arius. Is that right? Okay. But she stole it, so I've got no choice but to defend attempts to create Christmas memories. And I would argue that beyond the obvious, Jesus, really Christmas is nothing more than an attempt to create memories that we can hang on to for our entire lives. So the food, you prepare the food. I contribute to preparing the food in my household. It's basically so that people will talk about the food at the next Christmas. The presents, you do this to watch the kids. You give presents and good presents so that the kids have reactions that you can then later describe to other people. In my chapter in the book, I spent most of the time talking about audio and video recordings of Christmas because that's what my parents did. They audio taped our Christmas, which seems so 1970s. But they audio taped the entire thing, and I went back and listened to them, and they were interesting and shocking and troubling in some different respects.
The signs that you were a hot sauce festival kind of guy came early. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know what you're euphemizing with hot sauce there. It's totally innocent. So I feel like this panel is sort of stacked against me because if you think about the way that the panel, at least I thought this before Mollie and Jonathan went, the way that the panel is lined up, you start with comedic legends like Jonah, Goldberg, and P.J. O'Rourke, and then you work down to somebody like me. And I spent the entire day reporting on the San Bernardino killings. So the mood of telling funny stories is not quite there. So I want to bore you with a story, basically a travelogue of a trip that I took with my daughter Jane, who's 5.5 years old, this past weekend to New York City in an attempt, I think it may have been a futile attempt, at least for her, to create Christmas memories. So my wife takes our oldest daughter, Grace, who's 10, to New York City every year with a couple. It's a friend and her daughter who's the same age. And they go to New York City every December, and they do all of the things that you do in New York City. And they come back, and they talk about it for days, and it's this wonderful mother-daughter bonding experience and what have you. And this year, I suggested to Carrie that she might also take our 5-year-old daughter, Jane. And Jane is a bit of a handful. She's been a handful from the day she was born. And Carrie didn't react kindly to this proposal and suggested, no, Jane would be better off at home with you. So I had a trip up to New York City for Fox on Friday. And I thought, what the hell? I might as well take Jane with me for 36 hours of Christmas memories. So we got up early that morning, and I packed her on the train. She packed her own suitcase. That was a problem. We got on the train. It was her first trip on a train, and headed up to New York City. And when she got on the train, I mean, it was this moment. It was my first memory of the trip. She's wearing, she's all decked out in a Christmas dress and a red Christmas overcoat and Christmas stockings and black patent leather shoes and a Christmas, what do you call those things? Hair, something or other, ribbon, bow, whatever. And she walks down the main aisle of the Acela, and everybody in the entire train is looking at her like, oh, isn't she cute? And isn't she cute? And I'm sort of feeling like I've already won. Father of the Year. So we get up to New York, and I've got to do Outnumbered, the show on Fox, which is an interesting show. It's always the first half hour of the show. For those of you who don't watch it, the conceit is there's one guy, they call him one lucky guy, and then 4 women. And the first half hour of the show is a discussion of whatever the hard news is of the day, and the second half of the show is basically battle of the sexes. And I always assume this is where I'm going to end my career in that part of the show. Well, I survived. And the show ended, and I grabbed Jane, and we were off. This was the beginning of our weekend. So we immediately went to Times Square and stood in the line at the TKTS booth because I'm too cheap to buy, full price tickets to a show. So we stood there, and we ended up getting tickets to Matilda, and it was great. And it was once again one of these moments. I had her on my shoulders. There are Christmas carols playing in the background. And I've got her on my shoulder, and we've just spent a bunch of time on the show talking about San Bernardino, and I'm thinking, Times Square is ripe for a terrorist attack. It's not exactly the moment that you want to have with your daughter. We left there and immediately went to Rockefeller Center, and she thought this was the greatest thing ever. And she's very sort of dramatic about these things, and she sees the tree, and you can just see in her big eyes there's all of this wonder. And she looks at me and she says, Dad, I've been waiting my whole entire life to see this tree. And I think you didn't even know this tree existed a few minutes ago. But she does that. I mean, she knows what works, so it works for me. So we went to the front of Macy's, and you can walk, and they have these window displays in the front of Saks, and Bergdorf Goodman has this, crown jewels thing where there's these massive diamonds. And I'm trying not to encourage that in her, but it was pretty cool. So we did all that, and then we walked about 1.5 miles across town to Dillon's Candy. I don't know how many of you have been there. It's a 3-story candy store. This is the greatest moment of her entire life, was at that moment, and I let her buy a little bag of candy. We went back, and we had dinner at Guy Fieri's new restaurant in New York City, and it is not, culinary excellence, but she watches the Food Channel when her mom does, so she thought that was pretty cool. So I'm sort of the dad of the year again at that point. And then we went and we saw our show, which was Matilda. And it turned out, there's a theme to this first day. The whole first day is just perfect. Everything is lining up. Everything is perfect. And Matilda, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's based on this Roald Dahl book. And Matilda's a 5-year-old, and she's learning her words, and she's learning to spell, and she's sort of this precocious child. And Jane is 5 years old, and she's learning to spell, and she's got all of reading her books. And so it's sort of a perfect moment, and she loves the show. She's wrapped with the tension the entire time. And the highlight of the show, of course, is this Miss Trunchbull, who's the evil headmistress of this school, who I have to say reminded me a lot of Donald Trump. I don't know if any of you have seen the show, but there's a point in the show where Miss Trunchbull gives the speech about how the world is divided into winners and losers, and goes on at some point. This is Donald Trump. So we do Matilda. It's the greatest day that you can possibly have in New York City. We wake up the next morning, Saturday, we sort of sleep in, and I've got to do some work. I get on my computer, and she says, Dad, will you color with me? And she pulls out her Christmas coloring book and her smelly markers. And I'm like, no, I've got to do emails. No. Of course I'll color with you. So we colored for 45 minutes, Dad of the Year, decide not to do the email. Then I say, would you like to go to see where I lived when I went to school in New York City? And she says yes, even though she has no idea. So we went up to Columbia and sort of traipsed around Columbia's campus. And I told her all these stories of taking on liberals at Columbia. I don't think she really got it. Then we went to brunch in the village, and we just, like you do in the village, you discover this place that's the best brunch you've ever had, and you tell everybody about it. It's this great thing. Then we did the carriage ride in Central Park. The whole thing is like, it's exactly what you would want if you're going to New York City. Well, I decided that we're going to end our trip on a high note, and we're going to go to my favorite restaurant in New York City, which is Grand Szechuan, near the National Review offices on 32nd and Lexington. And a former book editor of mine was a book editor for Anthony Bourdain. And Anthony Bourdain thinks this is the best restaurant in New York City, but nobody knows about it. And it's sort of a divey place, which makes it even more appealing. So we get in a cab, and we're going to go there. And we get in the cab, and she's sitting next to me. We've got all our bags because we're going to Penn Station at the end of this. And she sits next to me, and she's exhausted. And she starts nodding off in the cab. It's like 3 p.m. She can barely keep it together. And our hotel is at 46th and Broadway, and the cab cannot get across Broadway. So we sit through 3 lights, and immediately I'm just getting more and more angry, because that's what you do in traffic. You're just angry. And I look over, and there she is in her Christmas best, in her red dress, and her big brown saucer eyes. And I'm having these moments. So I say, Jane, what's your favorite part of the weekend? And she starts talking about the weekend, and oh, Dad, I mean, Matilda and the Rockefeller Center and the tree and the lights and the ornaments we saw. And she's going through this, and immediately I'm looking at her, and I'm starting to get a little weepy. Part of me is like, we have our memories. This is this great moment, me and my daughter, and you start to play the movie in your head, and I'm thinking, high school graduation, she's going to think back on this moment she had with her dad in New York City, and college commencement probably too. And we'll be dancing after I've given her away to her husband, and while we're dancing to whatever song she chooses, she'll have her head on my shoulder, and she'll be thinking of our trip, New York City, Christmas 2015. And maybe even when I'm dead, she's standing over my grave looking down and thinking, New York City. And she's looking out the window, and she's got this very pensive look on her face. And I'm sure that she is thinking, as I have been thinking, this is the greatest trip ever. And I literally start getting tears in my eyes. And the cab driver, who's an immigrant from China, says he's been driving in New York City, he said he never had traffic in 20 years of driving a cab in New York City, never had traffic like this. And he's looking back at me, and I'm all weepy, I've got like tears running down my face. I'm looking at her, she's looking out the window, and she's all pensive. And I ask her, Jane, what are you thinking about? And she says, Daddy, if a car runs out of gas and someone in the car toots really hard, will that make the car go for the rest of the way? It wasn't quite the memory that I had hoped that she would be taken away from this moment. So at least it was a memory for me. I think she's probably going to forget about the whole thing. She fell asleep shortly thereafter. Thank you.
I have no response to that. So with that, because usually I'm the guy who provides the fart humor, and with that we're going to move to PJ O'Rourke, who clearly needs no introduction. And PJ, defend the indefensible.
Commercialization is my choice, and I chose it because I truly do loathe the commercialization of Christmas. Specifically, I hate and detest paying the bills. Generally, I hate the gifts that I get as the result of commercialization of Christmas. The bunny slippers with the battery-powered ears flop up and down when I have to get up to go to the bathroom at 3 a.m. The terrible, horrible, no-good neckties that you then have to wear, for once at any rate. the box of therapeutic medical odor Ono socks from Dr. Scholl's. Perhaps I've arrived at that time of life where I am hard to buy for. They could give me money. However, that said, the commercialization of Christmas is fully justifiable on scriptural grounds. From Jump Street, three kings started the whole thing right in the manger. Casper, Melchior, Balthazar presented unto him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. Now, note the origin of three important Christmas traditions here. The completely inappropriate Christmas gift. Balthazar brought myrrh. Myrrh is used for embalming. Creepy thing to gift wrap and give to a newborn baby, or what, Number two, the way too practical Christmas present. Melchior brought frankincense. Frankincense is incense, which is to say frankincense is room freshener, Useful when swaddling clothes need to be changed, especially if you're changing them in a manger. But really, Melchior is the forerunner of my aunt who always gave me fruit of the loom Y-fronts. Number three, the Christmas present you aren't allowed to play with. Casper brought gold, and I'm sure baby Jesus would have preferred a stuffed camel, animal thing from Fisher-Price, by a long shot. Now, we don't know much about the later life of St. Joseph, but it is to be hoped that St. Joseph used the gold to open a franchise chain of carpentry shops in Egypt with bargain sale extravaganzas during the holiday season. Anyway, so that's right from the start. And I mean, all of the commercialization of Christmas, it's fully in place by the time you get to chapter 2, verse 11 of the Gospel according to Matthew. I quote, "Shepherds abiding in the field. They saw colorful Christmas lights that shone round them, and they were sore afraid." The way my wife is when I stand in the front yard slush and connect the socket that lights up the bulbs on the plywood reindeer and sleigh that are about to fall off the roof onto my head. Commercial Christmas music. I bow to the expert here on the panel, but playing over the loudspeakers in stores and restaurants and bars and on the streets starting the week before Halloween, as far as I can tell, has this biblical precedent. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host praising God, presumably by caroling, though presumably not by caroling Grandma got run over by a reindeer. John the Baptist mentions Christmas trees. He says, "And now also the axe is laid unto the root of the trees, therefore every tree which bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down," said John the Baptist. I assume Christmas trees are what he was talking about, because even the worst vegan wouldn't serve pine cone pudding for Christmas dinner. Meanwhile, I doubt Jesus is upset by all our commercialized Christmas eating and drinking. His most famous miracle was making a few loaves and fishes into, way too much food, into turkey, I suppose, in all probability. And his second most famous miracle was turning water into wine, and I assumed he turned something else into aspirin and black coffee the next morning. And then, of course, Santa. We have discussed Santa. I don't share Jonathan's reverence exactly. He's technically a saint. Do saints dress like that? Just putting it out there. Do saints sneak down chimneys? I mean, we get their halos all sooty. I have never heard of a saint with a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. In fact, I've never heard of a saint that laughed much at all, or that owned a reindeer named Cupid, which is in of itself, not that there's anything wrong with that. And then there's the stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke had encircled his head like a wreath. I'm almost certain that saints are tobacco-free. But nonetheless, Santa is implicit in Matthew 6, verse 4, that thine alms be in secret. And so we don't want to give up on that commercialization of Christmas. We don't want to give up on it because we don't want to have to come out and say that we don't believe in Santa, because that would mean that we would have to then write the 2015 version of the 1897 famous editorial in the New York Sun, a reply to young Virginia, when she asked about Santa Claus. And what we would have to write would be, no, Virginia, there isn't a Santa Claus. He doesn't exist any more than love and generosity and devotion exist, and you know they don't, which is why your life is so empty that you spend it writing useless letters to newspapers asking silly questions. How splendid the world is
This
with
is the
no
New York
Santa
Daily
Claus.
News tomorrow, right?
So splendid the world is without Santa Claus, almost as splendid as it would be without children like you, Virginia, because your existence contributes to climate change, to overpopulation, to species extinction. With no Santa Claus, there's no stupid childlike faith, no lousy poetry, no fake patriarchal, gender-privileged romance to make the existence even more tolerable and more intolerable than it is already. Yeah.
Very nice. And to wrap things up on this panel is our very own Rob Long. I know.
What does that mean, our very own?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I'm just filling in silence here. So, Rob, take it away.
Yeah, I don't even know where to begin. There's just so much crap that's been said. Starting with a weird kind of like, well, we were Christian, kind of we celebrated Christmas thing at the beginning. I'm an Episcopalian, so I'm kind of non-denominational in a way, but every Jewish holiday seems like it's the same holiday. It's celebrating that, hey, they almost tried to kill us all, but they didn't kill us all. That's pretty much every holiday. At least Christmas has a whole set of celebrations around it.
Christmas is about them actually killing the guy.
No, that's Easter. That's Easter.
No, that's him coming
Easter.
back, isn't it? Oh, no, I guess it's him being born. Yeah, Christmas, yeah. Yeah. Krampus is coming my way now.
I don't think just Krampus.
Even Hemingway.
I don't think just Krampus. But I did take notes here because I wanted to go through. Here's what we've learned: that James Lileks had a very sad childhood. He watched a lot of TV. Did anybody believe Jonathan Last's bullshit about walking down on the Christmas morning? Oh, I want to just read the letters from Santa. Raise your hand if you believe that.
Found it slightly suspect.
Yeah. PJ says, "Oh, I'm so hard to buy for." I'm here to tell you that PJ O'Rourke will receive with gratitude any bottle of distilled liquor that you could possibly find. It doesn't even have to be expensive.
Too true.
Yeah. Stephen Hayes is just a terrible father. And you know that he did those emails that morning. You know it. It's like come on. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna not do the email. I'm gonna really? And God, Mollie, man, I mean, I've known Luther. You're a Shiite Lutheran. Because I feel it's time to be honest here. Because we lie to ourselves at Christmas time. All it's about giving. It's about giving. It's not about giving. It's about getting. And I really do mean this. The two great Christmas texts that we have, it's not really in the gospel. By the way, the three wise men, they're not in the gospel. No gospel says three wise men or gives them a name. It's just some, right? Or two tops. I'm looking to Mollie like.
We don't know how many. We don't know their names. That's just tradition.
Yeah. But we do know they brought gifts, because gifts are important. We do know that was the most important gift in the traditional Christmas story is the one where these two, forgive me, lousy parents who did not plan ahead.
Oh my gosh, I really might be slapping heretics
Yeah.
today, aren't I? Why not?
Did not plan ahead. It's not like a decree from Rome just came. Oh my God, a decree from Rome. We got this email. No, it came a long time. They could have planned. They didn't plan. They get to the thing. There's no place there. And then the guy nicely says, well, you can be over there in the barn, which is an act of generosity, the primary act of generosity that I think, of course, nobody says the evil innkeeper, but I mean, come on, the guy's got to make a living. And the second Christmas text is A Christmas Carol, which is Scrooge. And more like that's more the secular Christmas Carol. And that's why I think that we need to be sort of super honest about it, because the Scrooge story is miser, doesn't give anybody anything ever, and then at the end he's a nice person because he got visited by the ghosts. And you can believe that if you want. You can believe that he didn't do the emails. You can believe anything you want today. This is a holiday, right? But the truth is that if you look at the Scrooge story, and we do have the text. There are three ghosts. Well, two of them told him about the past and the present. Nobody's really very nice to him at all. He doesn't ever get a gift in the whole book. Nobody gives him a gift. Nobody puts anything under that tree for Ebenezer Scrooge. And then they say, well, why is the guy such a jerk? You know what? Maybe give him a gift once or twice. It's true. Nobody ever does. The first 2 pages of the book, guy comes in. Oh, first of all, first 2 pages of the book, he's working, creating value for clients, I imagine. And the little clerk is like, well, can I maybe take tomorrow and the next day? Take tomorrow, the next day. Yeah, why don't you take every day off? Fine. Take it all off, because obviously money grows on trees, right? And we're supposed to say, oh, what a greedy guy. But you know that if you had an employee who wanted all that from you all the time, you'd draw the line too. Then 2 guys come in and ask for money. They ask for money because apparently the poor or whatever. And it's a complicated passage. I won't go through it. But he basically says, I pay taxes and to support the various organizations that are for the health and welfare of the underclass, and I really feel that those taxes are my contribution to the general welfare of the population. I mean, that's the Al Gore attitude, right? I mean, they only give $200 a year to charity. Basically, your basic liberal thinks your taxes are your charitable contribution. I mean, it's sort of a fair thing to say. And that's just the first 2 pages. The rest of it is a litany of things that they did to this man. Humiliated him at school. He lost the love of his life for no real reason. He maintains a business. By the way, 1 piece of coal for the week, because air quality in London is bad, and he's doing his part. I realize this is maybe an idiosyncratic interpretation, but I don't think it's wrong. And at the end, he has this transformation. And that's where the lie comes in. Because we all like to get presents. Christmas is not about giving, it's about receiving. And I don't care what you say, Jonathan Last, you did not read the letters first. And that's okay, because the presents that we give each other, preferably expensive presents. I mean, yeah, you're right. I guess there's probably no need for embalming fluid at the time, but you trade it for something like it has value, right? It's a store of value, not so bad. If I'm in whatever year it was, and somebody gives me some myrrh, I'll figure out a way to make a buck out of that. And that's the most important takeaway for the Christmas season, I think. We can listen to the carols. We can tell each other little stories about how we didn't do the emails when we know we did. We can talk
Seriously,
about how
this is the only time I didn't do the emails. I've done them every other time.
The emails. I bet you we can find some time-stamped tweets.
Tweets are not emails.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, honey.
Just saying.
Yeah, honey.
Just saying.
Great. Oh, yeah, look at that. Oh, yeah, look at that tree. Let me I got to attach a GIF. But the truth is we want presents, and we need to be honest about it. And we need to be honest to everyone about it. Christmas is not for children, it's for all of us. Ebenezer Scrooge was not a child, but he did not get gifts as a child, and look how he turned out. Then there was a baby who was born who got gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And look how he turned out. Moral, give good presents.
And with that, I can think of no better present to give than the Christmas virtues. Thank you all very much for coming.
Yeah.
Guys, the best, yeah.